But now we would like to go on with the second roundtable. It's value for money, the value of ocean information for ocean enterprises in the blue economy. And holding the keynote, we welcome from the Department of Marine Systems at the University of Tallinn, Professor Urmas. Welcome.
Thank you, and thank you that you are back in the hall, that we can start with this roundtable. And I was asked to give a short introduction, and the idea here is to show what ocean information can give you, and especially regarding the blue economy enterprises. First of all, I would like to introduce, it's very arbitrary, but we do ocean observations because we have some global issues or problems or needs, then regional and local ones. And for all these problems or developments that we would like to have in the sea areas, we have established some frameworks like conventions and programs or some regional conventions and commissions to implement them. And also we have national strategies and legislation, how we can develop blue economy in our areas. And we always have someone who is funding those ocean observations. If we talk about the global ones, then usually they are governments. Then if we talk about the regional ones, for example, for Marine Strategy Framework Directive or regional sea conventions, then they are also governments or specifically some ministries. And if we talk about the local observations, then there are local authorities or enterprises. And we need all of them, but even today I have heard that all those 3 different scale observational programs, they have some limitations. For example, that the global ones, they have low resolution, they can't provide you the regional solutions. Then these regional programs, they are initially developed for some sectors, like environmental sectors or fisheries, and we have some borders between them, that they are not so well integrated. And for the local ones, they usually are short term. It means that they are not sustained for a long period because they are designed for a specific question. And then why we have those limitations is usually because of resources. We don't have unlimited resources. But if we think, and we try to explain it to those who are funding the observations, that what we can gain doing those observations or what we can lose if we do not. And in the EuroSea project, we have several examples. For example, one global example is that using these observations of surface carbon flux, we can estimate that how much ocean can absorb carbon. And if we recalculate it into euros or dollars, then it's something that has influenced billions of euros. It means that if you think that the observation program is too expensive, then I can argue that it's not. For example, one regional example is we do those environmental assessments of the regional seas, for example, in the Baltic. And we sometimes say that these assessment results have moderate or low confidence. But based on those assessment results, we develop very expensive programs of measures. And again, maybe we should have more measurements that the program of measures will be exactly those that we need, and we can then gain some money. And local examples, they are for local authorities, or this example that is also developed further in the EuroSea project is this environmental control panel for ports and cities. And this is my topic today, or this topic of this panel. And I show you, since I was asked to show some examples from the EuroSea project, I will start with this one, which is this operational services for ports and cities. And the goal here is to supply operational oceanographic products to integrate monitoring and forecasting systems that we have in the area, adding something specific, and then it will help to improve environmental management and warnings in ports and cities. And what was done in the EuroSea project, this OSPAC tool was developed further and deployed in 3 sites and tested. And additional measurements or observations were added, and the project participants, they used already existing observation and models, and then in Barcelona, Taranto, and in Colombia, for 3 sites, those services that were demanded by the ports were delivered. This is one example. The other example is related to the aquaculture industry, where in 2 locations, one in Ireland and the other in the Mediterranean Sea, close to the Spain, special observatories were developed or deployed, and the goal of them was to give operational information about some extreme events that can cause some damage or losses to the aquaculture industry. And we dealt with persistent marine heat waves, for example, and with storms with significant wave heights. And in both these sites, these observational buoys were installed, and specifically the sensors that were needed for that site or for that problem were installed. It means that this observational program or this service was developed together with those companies interested in the observational results. And the third one is a bit different, that flood risk visualizing tool was developed for the city of Hull in UK. And this is again that the observations and forecasting models were used to have this visualization, and it helps coastal planners to see what will happen if this or that scenario will be in the future. And it also helps not just for enterprises or coastal authorities, it also helps actually to engage general public that to understand that what could happen, and also to understand more the science behind. Okay, these are the 3 results, and I would say that we need all those in situ observations, and we need them to provide different services. And also we need these kind of developments for the blue economy enterprises. And best services are developed, as also the EuroSea project showed, when we have very good cooperation with enterprises that are users of those services. But also in all these cases, the data that were acquired with these systems, they were also available for all other kind of uses. And this is very important that the private sector also understand that the observational platforms which are operating with their help or in cooperation with private services, they are used also for many other purposes. And I think this is the future, that we have to do measurements, but we can use them in many different applications. Thank you.
Thank you, Urmas Lips. Please find your seat. And I'd like to welcome the speakers on stage first, and talking about aquaculture. She is here from Spain today, the project manager of the Institute of Marine Sciences of Andalusia on behalf of the European Aquaculture Technology and Innovation Platform EATIP. Please welcome Marta Bonnet-Dunbar. Also an expert to the panel, but for fishery, he was responsible for producing FAO's flagship biennial publication, State of World Fisheries and Aquaculture, working for the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. The team leader, Information and Knowledge Management of FAO's Fisheries and Aquaculture Division, Marc Taconet, is with us. And if we talk about value for money, we talk about data values for harbors as well. She brings an example to the panel, the Director of Innovation from Barcelona Port Authorities, Emma Cobos. And there's also someone who can't be here today, but he sent us a video.
Thank you for the opportunity to make this contribution to the discussion on the value of ocean information for ocean enterprises in the blue economy. My name's David Basset. I'm the General Secretary of EATIP, the European Aquaculture Technology and Innovation Platform. And the first intervention I would like to make is to offer my apologies that I can't be with you in person at this event today. Unfortunately, the event clashes with the Aquaculture Europe 2023 conference in Vienna, where myself and the majority of my colleagues are assisting and participating. But I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to make a short video presentation to you. Ocean information for aquaculture as part of the blue economy is an extremely important topic for us. Precision farming and the use of data is one of the key tools that will be seen by the sector in the development of future farming. Not only do we use data and ocean information in the terms of maximizing and optimizing the precision farming for operational activities, but it's highly relevant in the areas of remote sensing and early warning systems. And that could be warnings and forecasts in a variety of areas, be that relating to water temperatures, weather patterns, events such as algal blooms, or wave forecasts and storm forecasting. Data use for sighting, location, optimization of that sighting, and addressing issues such as water flow and water exchange patterns is extremely important to us. Within the wider concept of marine spatial planning, the single key factor limiting growth in the industry, as identified by many of my colleagues, is the lack of absence to sites. And by improving this through more sophisticated digital and satellite techniques and technologies, we hope to arrive at a more integrated and consensual marine spatial planning system. Indeed, in the past, we have collaborated both with the EMADNet and Copernicus programs alongside colleagues at DG Mare and DG DEFIS, looking at ways we can use those technologies, and we're very keen to continue that work in the future from those initial meetings we had looking at the Mediterranean, North Sea and Atlantic and indeed Black Sea. There are obviously issues relating to costs for that, issues relating to the resolution of the data, and issues relating to how we will access and share that data, but it is a program we're keen to engage on. In short, the pooling of data, the use of data for sighting, the use of data and ocean information for operational aspects, and the use of ocean information in terms of risk management for the sector, aquaculture being considered a high-risk enterprise, is of vital importance to us. The continuing requirement for the development of precision farming for the economic sustainability of the industry, likewise. As such, I hope this very short intervention demonstrates to you the high importance and value, monetary and strategic, of ocean information for aquaculture development within the blue economy. My thanks again for this opportunity to speak, and my best wishes to you for a successful event. Thank you.
Thank you, David Basset. Maybe he's watching online. And Marta, you're here on his behalf. And I would like to address the first question to you. He mentioned the aquaculture as a high-risk high-risk version to earn money on the fishery, actually, or like with aquaculture. And if I think of the aquacultures I know in the north, like Baltic Sea area, Norwegian area, these are very small, and you say it's like 80% of the aquaculture companies are small businesses. So how does it work to provide the data to such different and very small businesses to requirements he just mentioned?
Yeah, is it on? Yeah. Thank you for this question. So I'll try my best to represent EATIP here and what David says, and also bring in a little bit of our experience from what we did in Work Package 6 in the EuroSea project. I was involved in the local examples that Urmas presented before. So the small companies, that is in fact a key challenge. And especially because a lot of them may be at higher risk of impact from extreme marine events. So one of the main points there is our key collaborators are associations and cooperatives that join companies together, education, training, data capacity building, and linking of sites into network groups, for example. Also cost, obviously, is a major consideration for smaller producers, so access to open data and free data is really important there. And I must say in Work Package 6 we did touch on all of these points. In the end we worked with two very big companies, and that's the simple fact that we were looking for companies that were able to deploy and maintain two data buoys, and they have the resources. It's important that these companies work with associations to then share the knowledge that they've gained and the data with the smaller companies as well. We've also developed a marine observatory that provides open access data to all end users. It's also available via Copernicus, so we work with them directly as well. So those are all things that we touched on in our small example, let's say.
So I head on to the fishery. Actually, it's not, I mean, you have like huge fishery companies involved as well, but also a lot of small businesses. How does it work there to provide data, which they need in a little different scale than what's needed for aquaculture, but still? Marc.
Yes, first thank you, EuroSea, for inviting me at this very interesting symposium, which opens up my mind and eyes on what is being done on the ocean observing. I would like to take my hat both of a global expert in fisheries, but also take the perspective of the fisherman. The fisherman, as an industry person, expresses values in terms of good revenues, or at least preserve my activity, improve safety. What value does it bring to information in this respect? It is where can I fish, what, and for how much. And so long he preserves this jealously, he will make his earnings. When this starts to be spread, this is a gold rush, everyone comes to fishing, and the next question is how do we ensure the sustainability of this resource? And this is where state efforts come to play. They ask the fisherman to become an observer of the state of the sea fishery resources. And I would like to say, what does the fisher bring as an observer? He brings this data, what, where, how much, to science, if he deems to share that, if he has trust. And then science will lead management to define quotas. This is where, when the quota are allocated, this is where this links to the economic benefits of the fishermen. Now, this information has always been, yes, for ages, collected in paper form, now increasingly computerized, but how does information technologies improve that? So, for example, for biology measurements, yes, there is an increasing number of sensors, measure stuff, etc., but they are still early stages, not reliable, not very accessible, impractical, often failing. So there is progress to make there. But where a very important information, data that the fishers really need is tracking data on positioning through different mechanisms or transmitters, because he increasingly needs to optimize efficiency fishing in an increasing competing ocean space, you know, MPAs, wind farms, and tourism, aquaculture, all these use of ocean space. So it needs to have precise positioning and rely on that to be able to negotiate when boundaries are established for wind farms or other purposes. He needs also to defend himself against frequent allegations of illegal fishing, and he could bring, you know, evidence or not that he is illegal. And he also, and we also need, he also needs that, for example, in fish aggregation device fishing. Sorry, yeah, getting far. Where, you know, he can know if there is fish around the drifting device so that he can jump on the fish. And we need the same information for managing, you know, fishing effort. We need tracking data. Small-scale fisheries need this type of information for improving their safety. So this is what fishermen can bring in terms of data to be shared, and indeed it can benefit of the ocean essential variables, but that more for states and predict on the longer term.
It's interesting to hear like two things like aquaculture and fishery, which we are maybe connecting as getting food out of the water at one point, but still it has completely different needs on data you need. And then we are heading on to another different example of data. Emma, you're from Barcelona Port Authorities, and you're also using some devices already. Let's have this one example talking about current measurements. Why is this important for you to have this in a port? Can you explain?
Should be on. Should be on. Okay. Thank you, Christine. Okay, for us, we are very involved. We are completely involved in the OSPAC project. Previously, we already talked about this. We already had a scorecard to have sea tide measurements or sea current measurements, all that we needed for our operations on everyday basis. But then OSPAC was interesting, and that's why we got involved, even if we had a very good scorecard. It was very interesting because it could give us more information, not only for the operations that we deal with, but also for forecasting and simulation, especially when, for instance, in Barcelona, we don't have much rain, as you may know, but when it rains, we have torrential rains. So that affects infrastructure, which costs a lot of money. Or maybe if there are torrential rains, our clients, the shipping lines, have trouble berthing. And because of sea levels, and the infrastructure is our scarce source. So this kind of information with very high-tech satellite information, sea sensors information, gives us a lot of tools for our clients to do operations more efficiently. And basically, they can save money, because once you get into the port, this is like a taxi, right? We put the meter and we charge them, because this is one of our assets. I think, though, a very interesting thing about OSPAC is that we also got the city involved. Basically, in Barcelona, nobody knows where the port starts and where the city starts. And ships do not know about that either. Nobody cares. But we have 20 kilometers of coastline, the port, we manage that. And next to us, you have beaches, you have the whole city, and the boundary, we know the boundary because we manage one side and they manage the other one, but we need tools integrated to be able to manage sea levels or problem with beaches and with the sand that goes away, and all such problems with infrastructure, being those infrastructures for leisure or for operations. We need to manage it in a shared way. And then EuroSea or OSPAC is giving us this opportunity to share the same data, to share the same scorecard, and maybe to modify it. So, for instance, at the Port of Barcelona, we have a lighting strike sensor that we put on as a layer, and we're very happy to have that more for safety and security on boats. Maybe the city is not so keen on that, but we share the same layer or the same kind of information, and that is very important, because very often cities and ports, although we do not admit it in public, we kind of work not really close. And we have a lot of reasons to be working close.
Getting back a little to my first question, to go to these current measurements, because I actually, maybe it's because I'm a journalist, like this example when you measure the currents, and let's talk about pollutions, for example. If you have exact current measurements in the harbor, you can follow where the pollution might come from or where it goes. And this, I can guess, is probably also important for like the leisure areas around it, right?
Yes, because the port is right next to the beach. I mean, we actually have 200 restaurants that belong to the port in the what we call the old port and beaches, and also 2 5-star hotels. So actually, don't picture the port only as an operations port, a logistics port. It's more also a leisure port. But of course, we have a program called MARPOL. We invest a lot of money, and the EU is very keen on that, and we don't have spills or littering very often. But it is true that with this tool, what we're going to be able to do, if there is a spill of oil, of whatever, we're going to be able to measure very, very well where the spill is going. With a very precise, in a very precise way, with sensors, not only based on sea, but also satellite information. And that's going to give us tools to control that spilling. So we're basically lowering down our level of risk. And there we have a very good risk management tool.
Urmas, you also mentioned flood risk as well, like coastal planning is also something you mentioned. So we are having a lot of different examples now for the blue economy use, but which system would you point out which requires the most improvement now, if you hear the different needs pointed out?
Okay, I think that if we have nowadays quite good forecast systems for the flooding or storm surges. This is something also we can have very good forecast systems for the waves. But where we struggle, this is forecasts for biogeochemistry, for oxygen, plankton blooms, something like that. And all these services that we have touched today, they rely on observations and the models. And the observations, I think, are crucial, because if you don't have these operational observations, then the models can fail. And this is also one thing why we urge all those companies of blue economy to participate also as in cooperation with us, doing some measurements or observations, because if the observations are close to your site, then the forecast or warning will be the most accurate for your site. It means that even if we have this forecast available for everyone, then you will have your observations there, and then the model or the forecast will be much better in that area. And therefore, you, for example, what the example of this current measurements, we have models. We can model the drift, but if you have real measurements in operational mode there, then you know that the forecast or warning is the right one.
Marc, you wanted to say something because I was, it felt like you want to do.
Yes, thank you. I like the slide that Urmas presented on global, regional, and local. You know, these ocean observing products are very, very useful to address climate change impacts on fisheries. So the question of the fisher, where will I fish in 10 years? It's not the immediate benefit, but it is an indirect benefit and is concerned for the future. This would be very well addressed already today by the products available at global or regional level, where you can deduct through the models, you know, on primary productivity, surface temperature, etc., the impact on species distributions and quantities, the risk of invasive species, chloral bleaches, and disappearance of the ecosystems, so that's already a big value. Indeed, when you come to more local levels, the resolution is always often lacking, and maybe the type of variables, as you were saying. And one can question this as high cost, etc. So maybe the fishermen themselves could become collectors of that. Maybe it would cost less, by the way, because they are anyway operating, and yes, you need to invest something. But at the same time, you need to engage them. So they need to find returns. Returns could be, okay, yes, your environment is very fast changing. We have improved our models. Look, in 1 year, or we already observe this drift. But then the management framework has to be flexible and adaptive as well, which today we may have some doubts on that. And so, yes, adaptation would mean that the frameworks are also able to adapt quickly. Otherwise, there will be no return, you know. Rules are fixed for 20 years. And then what the hell I would collect this data and make these efforts. Thank you.
Urmas, would you like to add something to that?
No, I completely agree.
Okay, maybe there are questions in the audience already. Not? Okay, then we go on, because I'm actually interested in the financing. If we talk about the needs of the fishery, you talked about that you have, like, of course, huge companies involved, but small ones. You're working with big companies for the project, but they're still the small ones. You said, if I got it right, that you're working with the big ones who can then provide the data and their knowledge to the small ones. Does that work already, or is it future wishes?
I mean, it works already in the sense that in our local example, we already have an open access data portal that's available to everyone. So it's being maintained in collaboration with the larger company, flowing into a local portal and via Copernicus Marine. So in theory, it's accessible to everyone. The smaller companies can also make use of those data. They're very local. And we hope that the good example from the bigger companies will flow via the business association and, you know, raise awareness and interest for others.
And if we're talking about these combinations, I mean, we're talking here about huge companies and small. You mentioned, Emma, the port authorities and the city of Barcelona. You said you want to be the champion of blue economies, Port 4.0. What do you mean with this? What's your wish for the future? What do you want to achieve in Barcelona and spread out to other port authorities and cities which are maybe as close as you are there?
Okay, we have a very strong alliance, the city council and the port, to develop blue economy and to maybe make Barcelona to be a strategic point for blue economy. We've seen in the last years, I've been in ports all my life, and infrastructure was always the thing, very big, and so all the high tech was always developed on infrastructure. And now we've seen in the last years that there's a huge movement with investors and companies going into high tech and into the sea, which is good news for everyone. And we realized as a port that it was very hard for us to keep up with this innovation. So we have developed several tools, like a private foundation with the port bringing funds for this development of innovation on sea high tech. But we also realized that we couldn't do it alone. So we have a strategic alliance with the City Council, who has also a blue economy strategy, and also the region, Catalonia. The government of Catalonia has also a full strategy on blue economy. And yes, we are building now an innovation hub with 20,000 square meters. And the main aim is not to make money out of these companies being there, but to be in Europe a reference point for blue economy, where everything with technology can make our ocean more sustainable. And for us, this is not an option, because we have the Fit for 55 package, we have a European trading system. So for the first time in history, ships are going to be paying for CO2 emissions starting 2024, so we just want to be front runners. And I mean, I didn't use the word champion, thank you. Let me be more modest. We want to be there. We don't want to be behind. We want to be front runners, and for that, you just need to invest. You need to invest in companies, in tools, and you need to be involved in programs like OSPAC, Horizon 2020.
Do you already feel like other ports and cities are like looking at Barcelona, trying to get the knowledge from you, getting in touch with you, trying to adapt?
Not really. We are right now in a very cooperative let's say, situation. We cooperate especially with the ports of Antwerpen in Belgium, where they have we have a common project called Pioneers to build a digital twin for both ports. And that's, I think it's 15 million euros, so it's a very nice package. Or we cooperate with Lisbon, Port of Lisbon. Really, we should look into Portugal. They are blue economy champions, I would like to say. And also we work very closely with Canada, Halifax or Port of Montreal. So we're now in a cooperative phase right now, which should be, because we're not going to achieve much if we do it on our own. But we're going to try to run faster, of course.
Precisely, it's hard to do everything on your own. Marc, I'd like to get back to you on using the satellite data. We spoke about like devices measuring currents, for example, but you mentioned the tracking, for example, which is getting more and more important for the fishery. Does that work in a good way already, or what is the need you would point out which is needed for the fishery for the future to more give the value to the nowadays data, especially for tracking, for example?
Okay, yes. Well, tracking is made through different devices. You have VMS systems for legal fishing. You have automatic identification systems. You have also high resolution images or even radars now. They are all, you know, bubbling up, and they have all their holes and gaps, and indeed. Integrating these technologies to have the full picture, reliable, comprehensive, with minimum gaps, especially globally, is what would be needed in terms of efforts and investments to then bring this into more affordable, well wrapped up, directly accessible products. And these are, we heard a lot about integration of data sources and algorithms that can make that. Yes, there are many initiatives, but it's not yet, you know, readily available to everyone. And indeed, the low-hanging fruit is to go with the more powerful, the industrial vessels, for example. But we need to make this accessible and usable by small-scale fishers. which there are also a number of attempts, and they will benefit from the progress made with the bigger. But for that, for harnessing resources, for example, in FAO last year, we had the International Year of Artisanal Fisheries, a big year for developing partnerships, raising awareness of that sector, its importance, and all the investments needed. And again, this is partnerships, yes.
Urmas, maybe when we talk about fishery and fishermen, you're from the Baltic Sea, so we know the situation there. We have a lot of small fishermen trying to keep up with the situation, having no fish. So is this also something you notice, like in the more regional or local area of the Baltic Sea? How does the data transference work for fishery there?
I think we have a quite good this kind of observational program for fisheries or for fishery management, but I also would say that despite that, every year we think that the quotas that were delivered are too high, because sometimes it's not just data on catches or fishes, but it's also data on environmental status. And if the environmental status is changing and you do not have this information, then maybe your estimate that how much you can catch next year is wrong. And we actually see that for some populations the size of fishes is decreasing, and it means that you maybe do not have any more the viable populations and you have to do something. But you all know that the fisheries policy is a European policy, and we do quite a lot, but it's surprising that we are still in this situation. And we have to, I would say we have to cooperate with across the sectors and try to understand what is actually going on. And this is a very complex question.
Complex question right now. But are there any questions from the audience, maybe, to this panel? There's one.
Yeah, concerning aquaculture, you said that it's run by small companies. In Norway, for example, taking the example from Norway, it used to be like that 25 years ago or so. Now it's run by big companies, which needs a lot of instrumentation. There are no people working on the sites. They are remote controlled, and people are sitting in offices in the city and feeding the fish and looking at if they have sea lice and if they, the conditions of them, how they are feeding, oxygen conditions. They have like between 20 and 30 sensors on every fish farm, and it's huge business. But it's a win-win situation because it's well monitored. They need to save the feed, and there are more and more possibilities of using not the sensors which are in the cages and around just close to the cages because they are affected by the aquaculture, but they are also interested in measurements further away because they need to adapt the feed to different densities, things like this. And they also have constantly ships sailing in and out of the base. In Norway there is about 1,300 sites for salmon, and these ships which delivers feed for the farms and which comes and pick up the fish and also do the treatment, for example, for sea lice. They are sailing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and on some of them there has been sensors on them. And the more you go into collaboration between science, where you can do prediction models for when you have, for example, toxic algae blooms and jellyfish coming in or things like this, the more they see the interest of the collaboration, and the more also science can benefit from measurements that are done. I mean, the coverage they have with the ship sailing and with the fish farms in the coastal environment is fantastic. And it was never like that before when it was small fish farms because they don't have the money to invest in such infrastructure.
So do I get it right? You would address that there's a lot going on already because the companies are that big, but there's still kind of a lack of connection to the scientists, so there could be more collaboration. Did I get that right?
I think there could be more collaboration, but I think it's getting more and more common. And I think it's also what you saw in Spain. I don't know, Marta, this company there, for example, they also have this remote feeding and remote, I mean, how many sensors do they have in their cages? A lot of sensors around and in the cages. And I mean, I see the same thing in Tasmania, for example, in Australia. They go to more and more industrial sites, and that's good for the production. And because they invest in it, because they gain a lot of money on that. They don't want to overfeed, and they have to prove that the fish had good conditions with regard to oxygen during the entire life cycle. And they have to do a lot of measurements before they are allowed to get a new concession to prove that they didn't pollute the environment, and that they can come back and do a new cycle. And so, yeah, it's in this case, I think it's good with more bigger companies coming in. And collaboration, I think it's increasing more and more.
And also then it's probably more down to, or not down to, but to the weather predictions of like trying to avoid damages to the facilities and things like this. So this is probably more the data which is needed. Yeah.
I also have a comment on the harbor things. I mean, the monitoring there, it's not only, I think, we are involved in some projects in Sweden where they have 150 stations online for navigational safety and water level monitoring. And there, these data are used, of course, for the ship entrance with currents and stuff like this, water level, density, because the level of how deep the ship's the draft is. But they are also, since this has been operational for 10 to 15 years now, it's used a lot by the public, by sailors, by divers, by fishermen, leisure fishing, by regular fishermen. I mean, this is whenever a station is down, the public calls in and say, "What's happening here? Why is not this station working anymore?" And yeah.
The stations we have, they've been there for quite a long time, but it's usually, as I said, they are being used by the port. And now for the first time, we're sharing this information with the city through the project OSPAC. And I understand, it's not where the project is right now, but I understand as end user that, that this should be, I mean, the data should be available for society as a whole. And looking at the maps and the scorecard, it's actually quite easy to understand. In our environment department, it's a biologist who's looking around the map and the different data. So I understand you don't need to be an oceanographer or, you know.
Yes, on aquaculture, what we heard from the video and the example that is described for Norway. So this tells how bigger industries can invest in what was called precision aquaculture. In FAO, globally speaking, this is very much encouraged by our Director General as a strategy. He calls that digital agriculture, which we decline into digital aquaculture, where you have all these sensors and combined with satellite images, which have not the level of resolution needed for the very local decision. So this has to be combined with the sensors. And this allows fish farmers to optimize the growth of fish, of healthy fish, minimize the impacts on the environment, and also provide the evidence base for certification so that they can prove that the water quality, etc., environment is safe for the fish that they are selling. And this is a need that is really rising quickly. So yes, we fully endorse this approach. It starts always with the low-hanging fruit, the easier, the ones who can invest. But our role, for example, is to help spreading this to the smaller one, so to leave no one behind.
Leave no one behind. Any more questions from the audience? Looks like it's not the case. Marc, maybe you would point out your wishes for the future to fishery data use and what's needed.
Yeah, well, in general, I very much welcome the message of this, of what I could get through the number of interventions here on efforts and investments on better integration of ocean observing systems in their all forms. I mentioned what the fishing industry, we mentioned what the aquaculture industry can bring to this wealth of observations, also for their benefits. The products are not readily available in easily accessible ways, affordable ways in cost terms, reliable and accurate as well. So the investments are needed there. We, as a UN agency, we don't want to leave anyone behind, as I just said, and so we want to help deliver these products in an equitable way and in a way that can be, where the users can be well informed. Again, the quality can always improve, and you have to avoid using this type of product in a misled way. Thank you.
Maybe you can head on your, or you have your own one, Urmas.
I would like that we will get in the future more and more private companies as partners in the ocean observing system. And to do that, I understand that we have to offer the services that are fit for purpose, so that they need most. That they should be exactly the right precision and resolution that they can use it. And then we will have, and we will all then gain, and our observation system will grow. Thank you.
I have basically the same wishes as Urmas. So those of us who have been here for these days already, we've heard this a lot, and I mentioned it yesterday, but the trust, the engagement with the end users from the very start, the co-development of the bespoke products and services that they really need, and more investment in time, more time investment really should be put into really listening to the end users and including multiple feedback loops to really see that the science that we're producing is very specifically useful for each one of the end users with their very specific needs. We saw that in the aquaculture companies that we're working with. We're only working with 2 companies. They're both open ocean finfish aquaculture companies, and even there, just the difference in the species makes a huge difference in location of what they really need in terms of data and early warning systems. So it's very important to invest more time, I think, in really working with the industry partners. Yeah.
Emma, as an end user.
There's nothing left. No, just one wish. We understand from a port's point of view that taxation will be a speeding up issue for all this data, innovative tools, and so on. Maybe as a wish, I would say, and always from a port's point of view, is that I would love oceanography be as sexy as meteorology, right? I see a lot of funds into meteorology, even in the port, where infrastructure is very important, but the sea, we have to look at the sea as well, as a partner, not as a supplier, because we always look at it as a supplier of our economic growth, our richness, whatever. Yes, richness, but we need to look at it as a partner. So, so this is my wish. And one example of that I never thought it would explode in such a way is the America's Cup. This is a racing, amazing event that, to be honest with you, I didn't know anything about it before they decided to come to Barcelona. It's happening in 2024, and it's not about sailing, it's about technology. And these guys are demanding, you don't believe what they're demanding, And there's money there. There are sponsors. There are companies. So this is exploding. So my wish is we need oceanography to be sexier, if you allow me the word.
Sure, I do. I like this actually very much. Let's get the ocean more as a partner. We're still guests. There's another question.
More of a statement, actually. I feel like I need to correct you. Oceanography is so much sexier than meteorology, and any oceanographer in the room knows it.
I didn't say it's not. I said what I meant is how it is perceived, you know. But yeah, I totally agree with you.
Well, we have it sexy as it gets. Thank you very much. Thanks to this panel, Urmas Lips, Marta Bonnet-Dunbar, Marc Taconet, and Emma Cobos. Thank you very much.